Hi, I'm Miguel, co-host of the Rapid Returns Show powered by MeetOtis.com. I'm here with Patrick Ward, VP of Marketing at
Rootstrap.
It's nice to meet you, Patrick.
Nice to meet you too, Miguel.
I think Rootstrap is sounds like an interesting company. Could you tell us more about what it does and what the unique value proposition is?
Yeah, so Rootstrap is a custom software development agency, but I always say that means nothing to no one. So the thing that I always describe us is we are the tech team behind Masterclass. So if you learned a Gordon Ramsay recipe during the pandemic, that was using our technology.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And what's your role at the company?
So I'm the Vice President of Marketing. And so that basically splits down into a 60-40 between demand generation, so everything in the client acquisition journey, making sure that clients are aware of Rootstrap, making sure clients feel more favorably towards us versus our competitors, and then ultimately through to a sales conversation and close. And then, all the areas of brand development. So making sure that Rootstrap is a compelling place to work. I mean, we, like many tech companies, feel the tech talent crunch that has happened over the last couple of years, and we can't take that for granted, right? We know that software developers have a whole range of different companies that they could work for, and we need to make sure that Rootstrap continues to be the most compelling place for them to do their best work.
And what are the ICP of your customers? What are your ideal customer profiles?
So we generally serve mostly an engineering background, somewhere between a CTO if it's an earlier stage, all the way up to a VP of engineering if they're latter stage. Generally, we're looking at around a minimum engagement of about $150,000 all the way up to many millions of dollars in engagement. And the way that we engage with our customers is two pretty simple models. Either we're doing it on a project basis, so that's building an MVP from scratch, going through version 1, version 2, version 3, et cetera, building new features, or it's staff augmentation. So this is where a client perhaps has an internal tech team, but they don't have a particular technology stack within their team, or maybe they don't have a particular programming language. That's when they usually tap us for help in augmenting that team.
Oh, that's great. So it seems like you have some enterprise clients and some medium-sized clients as well. So what methods do you use to reach them using strategies like paid advertising, for example?
Yeah, so we basically break it down into three core areas. So the first area is paid advertising, as you mentioned. We've got a sort of standard Google Ads play, which is just sort of trying to pull people into the top of funnel. We have an ABM strategy that usually is pairing those Google Ads of retargeting via something like LinkedIn. And so that's creating more curated lists based on industry type, based on title. And then you start going into a more broad suite of like other forms of retargeting. So this is where we bring in things like YouTube ads. We've brought in some of the other like more let's say early stage social media platforms, so like Reddit ads as well. We brought in, we've just rolled out Instagram as well. So really looking at the whole suite, because it's not just about paid ads to drive that initial conversion, but really about nurturing them over time. Because our average sales cycle is anywhere from 3 months on the low end, all the way up to 6 to 9 months. And particularly, like you mentioned, with those larger enterprise clients. And so because of that, you realize that it can't just be thought about in a one and done approach. Like you've got to be covering them with all different angles. And even from that extension of paid ads, it's not just about are you getting them, from a perspective of a sales conversation, but are you trying to funnel your content towards them? Are you trying to push them to webinars? Are you trying to push them to events? Are you trying to showcase press or thought leadership? All these different areas can also be promoted via paid advertising. We do use those holistically to make sure that every single person of the buyer's committee is influenced throughout the process as we're going through initial proposal, scoping out buyer discovery, and then obviously ultimately moving towards that final decision of are we going to be the the vendor who wins, or is it going to be someone else?
Yeah, I think the multi-touch approach is so important. And as you mentioned, with this kind of B2B sale, there's such a long sales cycle, and there's multiple decision makers in the organization, right, that you have to reach.
Absolutely.
So how do you think about, like precisely targeting those people? Do you start with broad audiences, or do you use like a more targeted approach there?
Yeah, so
especially with like the top of funnel of that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly when we look at some of our initial strategies, they're usually around problem-based content. So this ties into our second biggest channel, which tends to be SEO, or organic content generation. So when we think about creating content, it's not just about what can get, 10,000 visitors a month. It's really around that tailored idea of, okay, let's get into the mind of a CTO or a VP of engineering. What do they care about? What are the problems they may be searching? And from there, we can get them on a first initial piece of content. Once they've come to our site, they've at least shown some level of interest in us. And that's really when our ads team is able to go.
So you retarget them bottom of funnel and push them through.
Exactly. Because, it really is from a perspective of not trying to, gamify it, because let's be honest, if we were a B2C company, or if we were an e-commerce company, it makes total sense to think like laser-like about conversion rates every way of the funnel. But the fact of the matter is, as I mentioned before, $150,000 is a lot of money to spend, and not that many people have the signing authority or the budgets to be able to do that. And so we really
need to get a clear return.
Exactly. So we're really thinking about it from a person by person basis, right? Like, what does the CTO of this ideal client account care about?
Right.
And that's really why we think about ads in that way, rather than just, like you say, it's not just about focusing on the awareness piece and not just focusing on what stage of the funnel, but really understanding them holistically, and therefore using the power of ads to serve them the right content at the right time, so that they have all the information they need to make an informed decision.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because you need to have that, nurture them through that sales conversion process. So one thing that I think could be interesting too is when you have these decision makers where you have, because like basically you're taking decision makers through the top of funnel from, I guess, various sources. So they have a certain level of intent, and then you nurture them through the funnel. So one thing that we work on at Otis is we use a lot of first-party data to create very precise audience targeting. So if you have lists of decision makers that already work with you, with the business, things like their emails or their phone numbers, that becomes really effective to use to not only create audiences, like audience segmentation and lookalikes across different channels like Google or Facebook or Twitter, which is interesting for us because we're a B2B acquisition channel too, and we have a very strong payback period on channels that you wouldn't even think have a strong payback period, like TikTok, for example. Our average viewer on TikTok is like 30 to 50 years old, which is really interesting because you wouldn't think that's the core demographic of TikTok. So that might be something interesting to look into, is like using the first party data to not only create like longer attribution windows for your audiences, but also to target in a top of funnel approach so that you crack that problem of expanding top of funnel. And then you have a scalable channel moving forward. So that I think that's definitely something that we would love to help with if you think that could more precisely target your ideal customers.
That makes a lot of sense. Particularly, I mean, every marketer is really concerned about the third-party cookie going away, and I find that to be a false narrative, because what it ends up happening is most marketers think about, oh, I had all this access to all this data, so I could very precisely target. Realistically, all it means is it comes back to the first party data. So I really like your suggestion there, because the point of first party data is you have to earn the right to get that first party data. Like, consumers and buyers will still happily give you data in exchange for something of value. And that's really the era I would believe that we're moving in towards. It's not that customers are never going to share anything with any company that ever they do a transaction with. It's just that you need to reach a higher threshold as a business. Like, you need to say, hey, I need this data from you, but in exchange, you are going to get a more personalized experience. It's going to be more tailored to your specific needs. And not only just saying that, because every marketer can say these words, but actually delivering on that brand promise. I think we're in for some exciting times, so I appreciate the suggestion, Miguel.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and especially when it comes to those challenges with iOS 14 and the deprecation of third-party cookies and mobile attribution, that's when it really becomes important, because you have to find a way to surmount those challenges, create like longer, especially for such a long sales cycle, right?
Totally.
With like all these attribution windows. I think that's a great point, and we would love to work with you on some of the acquisition strategies in the future.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm Miguel, co-host of the Rapid Returns Show, powered by MeetOtis.com, and I'm here with Jack, VP of Marketing, and it was great meeting you and learning about Rootstrap.
Likewise, Miguel.
Thank you.